Take a look at this graph showing the explosion in this program. This is the amount of money the state has paid in Medicaid claims to autism treatment providers using your tax dollars. You can see in 2017, not that much, just more than $1 million. But you see the gradual growth here. In 2021, more than $80 million. But look at last year, more than $220 million paid out in claims with a grand total of just shy of $700 million. This is what state investigators are now looking at.
Is the biggest funder of Al-Shabaab, the al-Qaeda-linked terror group in Somalia, actually the Minnesota taxpayer? A federal investigator says yes. An alarming claim first reported by City Journal, which spoke with multiple former federal agents. The U.S. Attorney's Office has charged dozens of defendants across multiple schemes, including housing aid fraud, pandemic child nutrition fraud, and false billing for autism therapy. In total, prosecutors say these schemes have cost Minnesota taxpayers billions of dollars.
Still, there are people that have legitimately could use those resources that are not getting those resources. It's past criminal.
Minnesota is home to one of the country's largest Somali communities. Former state fraud investigator Keish Magan, himself a Somali American, wrote last year that it's uncomfortable and true that nearly all defendants in these major fraud cases come from that community.
Dozens of people of East African descent have been charged, convicted, and sentenced for stealing more than $1 billion in taxpayer money from government programs during COVID. As you know, Governor, that is more than Minnesota spends each year to run its Department of Corrections. So I want to give you a chance to respond to this. Do you take responsibility for failing to stop this fraud in your state?
Well, certainly I take responsibility for putting people in jail. Governors don't get to just talk theoretically. We have to solve problems. And I will note, it's not just Somalis. Minnesota is a generous state. Minnesota is a prosperous state, a well-run state. We're AAA bond rated, but that attracts criminals. Those people are going to jail. We're doing everything we can. But to demonize an entire community on the actions of a few, it's lazy.
Dozens of people of East African descent have been charged, convicted, and sentenced for stealing more than $1 billion in taxpayer money.
Jonathan Weinhagen is facing federal fraud charges tonight.
Callan Gray has been digging into the accusations. She's live in Minneapolis right now with what she's found.
Tonight, there are new calls for accountability from those personally affected by the crimes he's accused of. One grandfather of a shooting victim calling it unbelievable.
The indictment says from December 2019 through June 2024, former Minneapolis Regional Chamber of Commerce president and CEO Jonathan Weinhagen embezzled, quote, hundreds of thousands of dollars from the chamber and its business members. It says he entered into sham contracts with a fake consulting company he created and used an alias, James Sullivan, and at one point opened a line of credit in the Chamber of Commerce's name, used it for personal expenses, and diverted donations from chamber business members to repay the money. But for some in Minneapolis, the most upsetting charge is for mail fraud. It says the Chamber of Commerce gave $30,000 to Crime Stoppers to fund rewards for information leading to an arrest in 3 shootings in May 2021 that killed 2 children and severely injured a third. A year later, it says Weinhagen requested Crime Stoppers return the money, and when he got the check, he, quote, stole the money and used it to pay for his personal expenses.
Responsibility for failing to stop this fraud in your state.
Well, certainly I take responsibility for putting people in jail. Governors don't get to just talk theoretically. We have to solve problems. And I will note, it's not just Somalis. Minnesota is a generous state. Minnesota is a prosperous state, a well-run state. We're AAA bond rated, but that attracts criminals.
Do you stand by that claim of calling Tim Walz retarded?
Yeah, I think there's something wrong with him. Absolutely, sure.
You don't think
you have a problem with him? You know what? I think there's something wrong with him. Anybody that would do what he did, anybody that would allow those people into his state and pay billions of dollars out to Somalia. We give billions of dollars to Somalia. It's not even a country because it doesn't function like a country.
Somalis are not terrorizing this nation. We are helping it thrive. Somalis have always seen themselves as a fabric of this nation. So not only are we not going anywhere, We are not going to allow anybody to make us feel less Minnesotan or less American.
A lot of money there, and that same type of fraud Kirsten just told us about is exactly what led to an unprecedented crackdown in the state's autism program. Yesterday, 5 investigators revealed 85 autism centers in Minnesota are now under investigation.
Take a look at this graph showing the explosion in this program. This is the amount of money the state has paid in Medicaid claims to autism treatment providers using your tax dollars. You can see in 2017, not that much, just more than $1 million. But you see the gradual growth here. In 2021, more than $80 million. But look at last year, more than $220 million paid out in claims with a grand total of just shy of $700 million. This is what state investigators are now looking at, these soaring costs, and questioning how many providers are doing real work. But now that program is in the crosshairs of state investigators. As 5 Investigates first reported, 1 in 5 autism centers in the state is now under an investigation.
There was such a high need for autism services in Minnesota when the state began offering it that it's an unlicensed service. So there aren't the same structures in place.
And he and his staff tried calling providers in the state directory. He couldn't reach at least 100 of them.
No apparent email address, no website, nobody answering the phone.
Red flag, you think?
After a report alleges Minnesota public funds are being diverted to a terror group linked to al-Qaeda. Justice Department says it will take a look. National correspondent Jeff Paul has details.
They're calling for an investigation. 4 Minnesota Congress members addressing the state's U.S. attorney, demanding answers after a report claimed taxpayer dollars were ending up in the hands of Somali terror group al-Shabaab.
If you're paying taxes for services you expect and things you expect your state government to provide, those taxes should not be going to a terrorist group in a foreign country.
House Majority Whip Tom Emmer is referencing this article written by urban policy magazine City Journal, which is published by a conservative think tank, the Manhattan Institute. Citing unnamed sources, the report alleges funding that was supposed to go to state programs to help with housing and feeding people was being stolen. Without specifying an amount, the article claims some of that money was then sent to Somalia through a complex network where it eventually ends up aiding the al-Qaeda-linked terror group.
This is a huge black eye to the nonprofit community. There was lack of oversight. There's criminal intent.
Minnesota Congresswoman Ilhan Omar spoke at the state's capitol yesterday with other state leaders. She didn't directly mention the allegations of the report, but responded to Trump's announcement last week that he was terminating temporary protected status for Somalis in the state. Trump writing that Somali gangs are terrorizing the people of Minnesota.
Over the last 3 years, we have been working together to try and address some of the real serious problems that we have in our community. We have to be honest at times with the problems that we're having in our community, and we need our community to help us fix those problems together because it's real and it's serious. At the same time, if people have taken anything that I have said out of context in a way that's caused harm, I apologize and I'm sorry for that because that's not.